So, to echo what Sarah said, we live in a current global context of post-truths, alternative facts, and divisive politics. And I believe that now more than ever, we need to face and fight that with really bold truth-telling. Silence just doesn't seem to be an option. So I knew when I saw the call for storytellers for tonight, I knew what story I had to tell. It was immediate. So I'm happy I have the chance to do so. So this happened a couple years ago. I'm also going to keep things a little bit vague as well, but hopefully you have some takeaways from it. It was beginning of spring, just your average day at the office. A colleague of mine, we worked in editorial content. A colleague of mine approached me and asked me a question about the use of gender pronouns. A writer of a feature story that she was editing had referred to the subject of the story, the individual whose story we had the great honor of telling, with both he and they. There was some sort of back and forth there. She asked me what the journalistic standard of practice was. Do you use one? Do you use both? Do you go back and forth? So I said, as I would say now, that that is entirely up to the individual whose story we are telling. We follow up with them. We clarify with them what their choice is. So whether that would be he, him, or they, them, or an entirely different gender pronoun that was perhaps missed in the conversation between, or the interview between the writer and the subject of the story, which happens all the time, which is why you have an editor to come in to clarify those things. So, and as a surprise to me, actually, my colleague really adamantly disagreed with my suggestion. For her, she perceived that a use of non-traditional gender pronouns would get in the way of the flow of the article, would create a frustrating reading experience for her that was paramount to her. So her solution, or in that conversation anyways, her proposed solution would be to actually either pull the article entirely, just not publish it, back it away, or she would decide what gender pronoun to use out following up with the individual whose story we were telling. So frankly, I was really not prepared for that response, and I probably still wouldn't be today, because even as a grammarian and an editor, I come from the point of view that honoring someone's story and an individual's right to gender expression always comes before rules of grammar and sentence structure and syntax and all of those things. Because grammar and language always has been, since its inception, thousands and thousands of years ago, when we started making the sounds that developed into languages, it's fluid. It changes and evolves to reflect our change and evolution. I mean, we see it every day. There are new entries going into the Oxford English Dictionary every day. So I felt the need to stand my ground and in a way to defend someone who didn't have the chance to defend themselves in that context. So a tense argument followed in clear earshot of many colleagues, open concept kind of office. No directors around somehow. That worked out, I guess. Although I think if they were there, I still would have spoken up. I argued for what I believe to be the absolute precedence that an individual's sort of right to express their humanity and their gender in the way that they want to always takes over pretty much anything, and especially, rules of grammar. It was scary standing up in such a way, as my mom would attest to, who is in the audience today, and my partner right there. I don't shy away from arguments. I don't shy away from speaking up. But there's still a lot of situations, especially in a professional context, where I get pretty nervous. Being assertive is pretty scary. I had the sailor's knot for a stomach and the tight chest and the cartoon heart beating out of my body. But there really, for me, was no other option in that context. There was standing my ground, or there was silence, and I wasn't going to choose the latter. So I don't know if I changed, did I entirely change her point of view or her opinions? Probably not certainly just within, that sort of 2-minute conversation that felt like it went on for a really long time. But I do know that even during that conversation, she was able to take a step back and just be reminded that as storytellers and communicators, we have to honor the individuals whose stories we have the privilege of telling, because it really is a privilege, that we've been given. We as communicators carry a lot of power to do really amazing things and do a lot of great good with the words that we write and say and images we create, the stories that we create, the actions that we take. But with that, we also carry a lot of power to inflict some great damage as well. And of course, Martin Luther King, Jr. was right when he said that in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So it's also through our silence that we can, cause a lot of damage as well. So on that day, then in the open concept office, the directors round, and today, even if it was with the directors around, for me, standing my ground in that way was the only option, because silence just wasn't on the menu for me. So thank you very much.